It's a Sunday afternoon, and Steve is doing something he hasn't done in a while. He's scrolling through old photos on his phone. There's one from exactly 7 years ago. Steve at a friend's wedding, in a rented suit that didn't quite fit, holding a beer he probably shouldn't have been drinking on an empty stomach. He remembers what he made that year. He remembers what was in his checking account that week. He remembers the credit card he was still slowly paying off $200 at a time.
Then he swipes to a photo from last month. Same guy, a little more gray in the beard, but the numbers behind the guy are completely different. The savings account, the 401k balance, the job title, the mortgage. The credit card is long gone. There's an actual emergency fund. There's a real portfolio.
Steve stares at the two photos side by side and feels something strange. Because if you'd asked him at year 3 or year 4 whether anything was changing, he would have said no. He would have said he was running in place. He would have said this whole responsible adult project was theater.
But somewhere between then and now, something clicked. If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right and going nowhere, this video is for you. Because there's a pattern in wealth building that almost nobody talks about honestly. It's the same pattern in skill mastery, in business growth, in career capital. It shows up almost everywhere compounding is involved. And once you understand it, the middle years, the years where you feel invisible, stop feeling like failure and start feeling like the exact place you're supposed to be.
Before we get into the math, tell me something in the comments. How long have you been working on your financial life? 2 years? 5 years? 10? Just drop the number. I want to know where the people watching this are actually standing. Then keep watching, because where you are matters for what I'm about to show you. My name's Nick, and I spend too much time thinking about the psychology behind money. Hit subscribe and drop a like if this ends up being one of those videos you send to a friend. Here's the thing nobody explains. If you look at the trajectory of most people who have built real wealth, not lottery wealth, not inheritance wealth, real earned wealth, there's a pattern. It takes roughly 7 years of consistent effort before anything visible starts happening. 7 years of doing the right things while the scoreboard barely moves. 7 years of watching your inputs go in and wondering if the outputs are ever coming. Warren Buffett didn't become a household name in his 30s. He compounded quietly for decades. Charlie Munger had a line about this. He said, "The first 100,000 is a bitch." That's the whole quote. And what he was really saying is that the first stretch of compounding, the part where the math hasn't started to bend yet, is the emotional gauntlet that filters out almost everyone who tries. But it's not just money. Fidelity ran a study a few years back looking at their best performing accounts. You know who they were? Dead people. And people who forgot they had accounts. The accounts that outperformed weren't the ones being actively managed by clever investors. They were the ones being left alone for years, for decades. The 7-year rule is really a statement about human patience, about what happens when you don't touch something long enough for the math to do what math does. Read that again if you need to. Let me show you what the numbers actually look like. Steve starts putting away $500 a month into a boring index fund at 7%. Nothing exotic, nothing clever, just consistent. Year 1, his balance is around $6,200. Year 2, $12,900. Year 3, $20,000. Year 4, $27,700. Year 5, $35,900. He's put in $30,000 of his own money in 5 years. The market only handed him about $6,000 on top of that. $6,000 over 5 years. That's less than a used car. Now watch what happens next. Year 6, he's at $44,000. Year 7, $53,000. Year 10, $85,000. Year 15, $158,000.
Year 20, 260,000. Year 25, 405,000. Now pay attention. The first 5 years produced about $6,000 of growth from the market. Years 20 through 25 produce over $145,000 of growth from the market. Same person, same contribution, same fund, same rate. 24 times more. The math didn't get better. The math was always the same. Steve just crossed the threshold where his money started working harder than he did. So why does this feel impossible in year 3? Why does the middle stretch break so many people? Because the human brain is not built to track exponential curves. It's built to track linear ones. If you walk for an hour and cover 4 miles, you assume you'll cover 8 in 2 hours. That's how our expectations were shaped by every physical experience of our lives. But compounding doesn't work that way. Compounding is quiet, then quieter, then quiet, and then suddenly deafening. Your brain, meanwhile, is looking at years 1 through 4 and calculating a slope. It draws a straight line into the future, and the line it draws is depressingly short. Psychologists call this hyperbolic discounting, the tendency to overweight what's right in front of you and underweight what's far away. Steve at year 3 isn't stupid. He's not lazy. He's running a mental calculation his brain has been calibrated to run for 100,000 years of human history in an environment where rewards were roughly proportional to effort. Compounding breaks that model, which means his brain is going to keep telling him this isn't working, even when it is. Now, here's the moment where a lot of people quit. Not the beginning, the middle. Year 4, year 5, year 6. Fidelity actually has data on this. The single biggest predictor of retirement account underperformance isn't market timing. It isn't fund choice. It isn't fees. It's early withdrawals. It's people pulling money out of long-term accounts to fund short-term problems that felt urgent at the time and, in retrospect, weren't worth the trade. And when do most of those withdrawals happen? Right in the dead zone, right in the middle, right at the exact moment when the math is about to start compounding meaningfully. That's what makes this stretch dangerous. Not the amount of money involved, the proximity to the payoff. Let me ask you the middle question of this video. Have you ever quit something in the middle stretch and then watched someone else stick with it and win? A workout program, a business, a degree, a savings plan, a relationship. Think about it, because that pattern is not a moral failing. It's the pattern. It's the invisible law of every long game. So how do you actually survive the middle? 3 things, and they're going to sound almost embarrassingly simple, because they are. First, shrink the timeline you look at. If you check your portfolio every day, the noise is going to feel like signal. If you check it monthly, it's going to feel volatile. If you check it quarterly, it's going to look like it's crawling. But if you check it once a year, on the same day, and compare it to the same day the year before, something shifts. You start to see the slope. You start to see the direction. You start to trust the process, because you're finally letting the process show its work. Second, automate everything you can. Charlie Munger also said, the safest way to try to get what you want is to try to deserve what you want. What he didn't say loudly enough is that deserving something over 7 or 10 or 20 years requires structure, not willpower. Willpower runs out. Structure doesn't. Automate the transfer to your investment account. Automate the increase to your 401k every time you get a raise. Take yourself out of the decision loop. Your future self will thank your past self for making the decision once instead of 1,000 times. Third, find one metric that's actually going up, because the balance won't feel like it is, not for a while. So track something else. Track your savings rate. Track months of expenses in your emergency fund. Track how many years of your current lifestyle your portfolio could cover. Any of those numbers moves faster than your total balance does in the early years, and any of them gives you a reason to keep going when the main scoreboard feels frozen. Now let me tell you the part that gets me. If you're at year 1, this all sounds like a long time. It is. If you're at year 3 or 4, you're right where it hurts. That's the truth. If you're at year 6 or 7, you may already be feeling the shift and not fully trusting it. Trust it. And if you're at year 0, if you haven't started, the 7-year rule isn't a warning. It's a promise. It's saying that if you begin now, 7 years from today, there is a version of your life you will not recognize. But here's the part almost nobody says. The 7-year rule isn't only about wealth. Ask anyone who has built a career they're proud of. Ask anyone who plays an instrument at a level they didn't think was possible. Ask anyone who runs a business that's finally profitable. Almost every one of them will describe the same shape. Years of invisible effort. A middle stretch that felt like fraud. And then, almost without warning, a moment where the world started responding. The people who make it aren't the ones who found a shortcut. They're the ones who understood that the middle wasn't a signal to quit. It was the price of admission. So let me leave you with the last question. Look at whatever you're working on right now that feels invisible. Your savings, your fitness, your side project, your career, your marriage, whatever it is. Ask yourself honestly, am I actually failing or am I in year 3? Drop your answer in the comments. Because Steve at year 3 didn't know he was 3 years away from feeling everything shift. And Steve at year 7 doesn't remember what year 3 felt like, except when he sees an old photo and does a double take at how different the 2 versions of him actually were. The first 7 years are the hardest. But what nobody says loudly enough is that the 8th year is the reason you did the first 7. And you don't get to skip to 8. You have to walk through the middle. The good news is, you're already walking.